This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Welcome, family, to another wonderful edutainment, infotainment edition of the Artivist ThINks. The Artivist presents the Artivist Thoughts. This is Brother Ron, also known as R2, C2, H2, the Artivist, and the family. I got a great one for you today. I was there at Justice or Else. I was there at Justice or Else. As you all know, that was the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, the theme Justice or Else, which was sponsored once again by Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And I was there in Washington, D.C. on 10/10/15. The actual original date for the Million Man March was actually October 16th, 1995, but they went ahead with the 10/10/15, which is October 10th, 2015. And I was there. I made the track or the journey to D.C. from Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to share with you all what my thoughts are, what happened that day in particular, and my thoughts overall about the march or the rally or the gathering, as I call it. I call it the gathering of black folks. And let me just say once or more again that there were definitely more than 1 million people at the gathering of Justice or Else. How do I know? I was there. There was more than 1 million people there. A lot of melanated folks from the diaspora was there, was represented well, as well as some other people, as you all know. There, whenever there's a gathering on the plantation, you have other people as well on the National Mall. So I just want to share my thoughts. People ask me what my thoughts were about the gathering, the march, the rally, the reunion, as you will. 20 years ago, I was 15 years old. I didn't make the first march. I wanted to be there in spirit. I tried to look at it on TV. We didn't have cable at the time. I believe C-SPAN broadcast it, as they did this past weekend. They broadcast it. And basically, I could not get it on regular TV. So it was a media blackout 20 years ago, as it is 20 years later. There was a media blackout. Misinformation going around. People saying, well, thousands. If you're going to say thousands, at least say hundreds of thousands, okay? Because more than 1,000 people there. There was more than 50,000 people there. There were more than 100,000 people there. There were 1 million people plus there. And even if you look at the photos, you could tell there was over 1 million people at the National Mall this past Saturday. And also, if you go back to the Million Man March, they try to downplay that. And just looking at the photos, I just guesstimate it's probably 2 million people at the Million Man March, the original one back in 1995. But let's get down to the brass tacks, as we will. Great gathering. I went there with my sister, Melissa, and some of her friends. We met at the gathering. I sure had a lot of friends there I didn't get a chance to talk to, but they went. The reason why I know because I seen the photos and the responses on social media. So let's talk about this Justice or Else, this big thing. I actually had a chance to see the minister in Memphis this past August. 2 times I saw the minister in Memphis. To me, in my opinion, I really do enjoy listening to the minister, even though he takes like 3 hours to talk sometimes, or most times 2.5 hours. He reminds me of Baba Dick Gregory. You ask Dick Gregory one question, if you get that one in, he'll take about 2 hours to answer that question. He'll go around the world several times and come back to you. But this is what they do. Because these are elders. They have so much wisdom. They live so much life. They have so much, Dick Gregory, his birthday was on October 12th. And he was 83 years young now. And Minister Farrakhan is 82 years young. So these brothers have a lot of information to share with all of us, and we should be receptive into receiving the knowledge and the information and the wisdom that these brothers have, these elder brothers in our diaspora have to share with us. With that said, it was interesting because you had young and old, rich and poor. You had the celebrities, you had people from all walks of life represented in our human HUE men family. Everybody was represented well, everybody. So with that said, thoughts about the march I just told you was interesting. Now, I did notice some interesting things going on outside of the speech making. I was very concerned that the vendors I didn't see any African American food vendors at the march, and I raised this concern with one of the brothers of the FOI who was helping direct traffic. And he said, well, brother, I'm paraphrasing him. He said, basically, this event wasn't that type of event in terms of, they had people that wanted to sell things at the march, at the rally, at the gathering, at the reunion, but they were not approved of for whatever reason. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you got Asians selling, hot dogs barely heated up in the cold buns and making a killing. You got folks selling gyros, making a killing. I mean, there's no black place in D.C. that could have benefited from that. And then somebody raised a point saying maybe these people were already food vendors. They already had, their license to sell in that particular area that day. That's fine and dandy. But I also saw white people selling, Justice or L shirts, and other things, African, medallions and things of the nature. You had white folks selling this stuff. So did they have approval for the city? Did they have a license to sell? I don't know all the particulars, but my concern is with black people is that it's just like when we live in our neighborhoods. Everybody come into our neighborhoods. I almost said community. They come into our neighborhoods because the community is where you own things and that you create and control institutions. You control the wealth in a community if you are the people that live there. We don't have communities. We have plantations. We have concentration camps. We have neighborhoods, hoods. Okay, so it's just like, this was a special day for black empowerment, but at the same time, you have white supremacy pimpers on our special day for black empowerment, whereas that we seem not to understand that we must be able to control the economics of our of the place where we live. If we don't do that, we don't have a destiny as a people. We don't survive as a people. Not only that, we don't thrive as a people if we don't have that. So it was very troubling to see that everybody once again was making money off of black folks except black folks. So I thought that was a very interesting observation. And let me get into, let's talk about the minister's speech. I thought it was very interesting. Like I said, I can listen to Minister Farrakhan for hours on end, and quite frankly, expect to spend hours on end listening to the minister when he starts speaking. Like, when people say, well, we have Minister Farrakhan on a panel discussion, I'm saying, well, I don't think that's going to happen because the minister, he doesn't do panel discussions like that, because the minister has so much to say. It's like you listen to people like, okay, let's say if you had Dick Gregory, Minister Farrakhan, and Harry Belafonte all on one panel discussion. Is that really a panel discussion? Would that be able to happen in this lifetime? Harry Belafonte, Dick Gregory, and Minister Farrakhan on a panel discussion. I don't think that's happening, family. If it does happen, expect to be there for most of the day. It's like the Baptist church on steroids. You have those people talking all night. But, and I said it with love. I'm not saying it as a criticism, but, these brothers can talk. And with that said, I thought Minister Farrakhan, it was interesting. A lot of people, I ain't gonna say a lot of people, but some people were disappointed in the fact that he did not address what they thought he was going to address, which is the theme, or was the theme of the gathering, justice or else. They feel like he let folks down in terms of not providing a blueprint or a solution to what ails Black America. We know we're dealing with Ferguson, police brutality, you're dealing with economic situations. You're looking at the situation for Black folks even to get educated. HBCUs are closing. I just heard that the Florida governor cutting spending on HBCUs in Florida. You look at what's going on with the Black schools like Howard University, trying to stay afloat. There's so much stuff going on with Black people at this point, with a quote-unquote Black-looking president in the White House. It's interesting to note that Black folks are catching hell with a quote-unquote Black president or Black first family in the White House. But I think the minister, like it's one thing I don't think he really addressed in a concrete way for people's satisfaction. Now, I did hear people, or I talked to folks, they said they really benefited from hearing the minister he spoke for 2.5 hours on Saturday, that he did touch upon things that they felt needed to be touched upon. And he is a historian. Like, he did a great job in terms of bringing all this history that a lot of us may not be aware of. You know, a lot of us may not be aware of the history. And he brought a lot of that to the table. But people had some criticisms about his interpretation and the way he used his platform to relay that information. And, you know, you can't please everybody. You can't please everybody. It's like when you listen to Minister Farrakhan, it's like going to a buffet. You know, you pick what you want to eat and want to try out, and you leave everything, you know, where it is. You don't have to take everything that the minister says and utilize it. You just take the things that you feel like is the most relevant for your needs, and you utilize that. Like there's an old saying that a broke clock is right twice a day. We all everything for everybody. You know, there's more than one way to find a solution or to create an environment that is conducive to your survival and your success. So with that said, I thought that Mr. Farrakhan actually focused on the wrong founding father named Thomas. I felt like he should have talked about Thomas Paine instead of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, like, you know, to me, he's complex. He was brilliant, complex, and a hypocrite and all that stuff. Like everybody, we all got contradictions, okay? But I think Thomas Paine would have been a great choice to illuminate or enlighten our people on. Thomas Paine was interesting because out of all the founding fathers, he was most serious about eliminating African slavery or the enslavement of Africa and the exploitations of black people by this, by this country, by this republic, by this corporation. He was the most vocal. This is a guy who helped start, who provided the words of inspiration for the American Revolutionary War. This is a guy who wrote Common Sense and Rights of Man and all this other stuff. He was the guy that was what you call a revolutionary. When you said the pen is mightier than the sword, that could really be attributed to Thomas Paine because he did so much damage with his pen, writing, expressing his ideas and ideology and whatnot. And he's so misunderstood today as he was even in his time. He was most hated and most loved. Either you loved him or you hate him. There was no in between. He was a very polarizing figure during this time. But he didn't take the easy way. He always took the hardest way because he was true to himself. And he's still misunderstood to this day. But the reason why I bring up Thomas Paine once again, because he was the one out of all the founding fathers was the most animate against slavery. He said, how can we talk about freedom or living in a democracy when we want free black people, when we continue to exploit black people? And I want y'all to think about this. Thomas Paine, when he died June 8th, 1809 up in New York City. When he died, he only had 6 people come to his funeral. Only 6 people. And 2 of those people were free black men. And he was buried up in New Rochelle, New York, on his farm because the church would not allow him to be buried in a cemetery because he wrote some very controversial things regarding the church. And contrary to popular belief, he was not an atheist. He was a deist. He was a deist, D-E-I-S-T. Look that up, deism. He was not an atheist, but he was very critical, hypercritical of organized religion and of the church. And I guess this might be one reason why Minister Farrakhan chose Thomas Jefferson over Thomas Paine, because Thomas Jefferson, he actually created his own Bible. No, I shit you not. Looked it up, but Thomas Paine was very critical of the Bible, of organized religion. But he believed in a supreme being. I mean, he was a deist. So with that said, that could be one reason why I didn't bring him up. But I think he should be noted because he was like speaking truth to power. Like, he was very influential. He was a close friend of Thomas Jefferson. He was very critical of George Washington, which made him a close friend of Thomas Jefferson because Thomas Jefferson didn't care for George Washington's political philosophy in a lot of ways. And what I like about Thomas Paine is the fact that he wrote an essay about slavery, the practice of slavery in the Western world, in particular Great Britain and America, the use and the exploitation of black folk. He talked about this in a very powerful essay that came out. He wrote it back in 1774, but was published in Philadelphia March 8th, 1775. You can find it online. That's right, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. When I tell y'all stuff, I tell y'all the good stuff. I don't hold nothing back. You know, I believe in sharing. Sharing is caring. Sharing is empowerment. So we need to learn how to do that, family. We need to learn how to be there for each other and to share this information. But I wish the minister would have addressed Thomas Paine and made the people aware of this guy. And the name of the essay is called African Slavery in America. That's African Slavery in America. It was published in Philadelphia back in 1775. And Thomas Paine, by the way, was a founding member of the first anti-slavery organization in America, which was also founded in Philadelphia. So he's not just talking or writing, he's walking the walk as well. And I want to read some quotes from this essay. I think it's very important, but this essay, you know, it's worth a read. It's not that long. It's called, once again, African Slavery in America by Thomas Paine, the forgotten founding father. Let me read some things. You see why the church might have a problem with the brother or with the white man of this sort. I'm going to read some of this stuff. Okay. That many civilized, nay, Christianized people should approve and be concerned in the savage practice is surprising. Another quote. Christians are taught to account all men their neighbors and love their neighbors as themselves, and do to all men as they will be done by, to do good to all men. And man stealing is ranked with enormous crimes. It's another one. Is this doing to them as we would desire they should do to us? If they could carry off and enslave some thousands of us, would we think it just? One would almost wish they could for once. It might convince more than reason or the Bible. And one more quote. How just, how suitable to our crime is the punishment with which providence threatens us. We have enslaved multitudes and shed much innocent blood in doing it, and now are threatened with the same. Wow, you know, this, you see why the church might be pissed off at him, and it's not the reason why the church is fully pissed off, because you look at, just read a lot of his works. Like I said, this internet is powerful. It's leveling the playing field, because some of the most powerful institutions in the world is not built on bullets and guns, but information and knowledge. You look at the Vatican, you look at the CIA, the FBI, look at Wall Street. All these institutions run on information and knowledge. That's their most powerful asset. J. Edgar Hoover was able to be the FBI director for all those years because he knew how to keep information and knowledge. He had all types of information and knowledge of some of the most powerful people in American history. And let us not forget, before he became the number one G-man, he was a librarian at the Library of Congress. Okay, so a librarian was the most powerful person for years in this country. I'll read some more from the Irish Farrakhan. He spoke for 2.5 hours. He could have read this entire thing in that time. It wouldn't take no 2.5 hours to read Thomas Paine, African Slavery in America. I wish he would have did that. And we're going to talk about some other things. But I want to read another excerpt. The managers, the trade themselves, and the others testify that many of these African nations inhabit fertile countries, are industrious farmers, enjoy plenty, and lived quietly, averse to war, before the Europeans debauched them with liquors and bribing them against one another, and that these inoffensive people are brought into slavery by stealing them, tempting kings to sell subjects which they can have no right to do, and hiring one tribe to war against another in order to catch prisoners. By such wicked and inhumane ways, the English are said to enslave towards 100,000 yearly, of which 30,000 are supposed to die by barbarous treatment in the first year. Besides all that are slain in the unnatural ways excited to take them. So much innocent blood have the managers and supporters of this inhumane trade to answer for to the coming Lord of all. Wow. Written back in 1775. Thomas Paine was talking about justice or else. Imagine if Thomas Paine was still alive today. What type of hashtags would he come up with on Twitter? What type of social media propaganda would he be doing on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube? See, people, like Einstein said, imagination is more powerful than knowledge. You got to see yourself sometimes. You got to visualize. You got to have a vision for yourself in order to achieve anything worthwhile having. And like I said, I wish Minister Farrakhan, this was a missed moment because he talked about Thomas Jefferson, but he could have talked about Thomas Paine. But, like I said, Thomas Paine was not for organized religion, and Minister Farrakhan is a religious figure, and he spoke a lot about religion in his speech. So I guess there was no place for Thomas Paine, but Thomas Paine was a very spiritual man. If you look at, based on his writings, he was a very decent and honorable man. Like somebody said, he died in poverty. He had no friends when he died. He only had 6 folks came to his funeral. He had no friends. He had no connections. He basically was alienated from society, was ostracized, was an outcast for his beliefs. And somebody mentioned to Thomas Paine before he died at the age of 72. He lived a long life. He said, well, why don't you write a book or something and said that you renounce all the things you stood for about, your concerns about the church and whatnot. And he basically said Thomas Paine never told a lie. So he suffered for his truths. And now you fast forward to some years after his death, you got everybody claiming Thomas Paine, his words, the Winter Soldier, the Sunshine Patriot, all this stuff. This is stuff that George Washington them read, at Valley Forge when they're going through that terrible winter, about the wintertime soldier, whatever, and the Sunshine Patriot. Those were his words. And the time that tried man's souls, he wrote those words, immortal words. So your words create worlds. But what they said, I want to hip y'all to Thomas Paine and look at him, because even in death, he could not find any rest. His body was dug up by an admirer, taken back to England, but the English did not want to honor a guy who helped, them lose some of their colonies, who helped put a dent in their empire. Why would the British or the English honor a man who was born in England, a native son who betrayed the crown? So his body was kept in this man's attic until he passed away. In 1835, they found the remains of Thomas Paine in a box in the attic, and his son got rid of the remains. So to this day, we don't know what happened to Thomas Paine's body. So this man suffered all types of disrespect and just indignant, just disrespect, even in death, life and in death. But his words are immortal; they can't kill his words. But if you want to notice on the family, there are no major monuments or statues or things named after Thomas Paine in this country. I repeat, there are no statues, memorials, no streets, no buildings, nothing named after Thomas Paine in America. I wonder why. I just told you that he was against African enslavement and exploitation, and he called out organized religion. And even before he died, they tried to get rid of his legacy. Like when he came back to America, he met with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson helped bring Thomas Paine back to America in 1802. And I guess at this time, I think Thomas Jefferson, I want to say he was president. He was the 3rd president at that time, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And by that time, that was just eliminating Thomas Paine names from the history books. There was no reference or mention made of Thomas Paine. He should be up there with Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson himself. But they virtually, whitewashed his legacy. And even to this day, people still misunderstand the legacy of the man and his writings. So I'll talk all day on that. But also, I think Minister would have been served, especially talking about justice or else. People are all talking about, so and so wrote a manifesto. This is bullshit. They wrote basically Facebook posts. A real manifesto is David Walker's appeal to the colored citizens of the world, which was written back in the 1820s, and which may have cost David Walker, a free black man, his life. A David Walker appeal should have been read. It's funny, when you go to the library, you go to the public library, you go to the black people section, with all the black history books and all the other stuff. I could bet you that in every library in America, that there's a copy, a print of David Walker's appeal that probably have not been checked out since the 1970s. As the old saying goes, if you want to keep something from black folks, put it in a book. Take a look. It's in a book if you read. Okay, so David Walker's appeal, that's another thing that black folks need to be hip to. I mean, that's very powerful. You talking about justice or else? This cat was going ham. He was in ham. No pork on the fork ham, but he was going hard as but the thing about it is, like I said, a lot of us don't even understand what happened 50 years ago, let alone 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. And this is what happens. I remember that I looked at Dr. John Henry Clark online. He did a criticism of Minister Farrakhan and the first Million Man March. And I thought that was a brave for him to do. It was very brave, regardless of what you may think about what he said or about the man and his work himself. I thought it was very brave and courageous for him to come out there in that climate to, quote unquote, denounce Minister Farrakhan and the Million Man March. It's a video online. I think it's talking about, the Million Man March and fake black leadership. Now, I guess people need to do research. And Dr. Clark made some claims in the video presentation about minister and about black leadership in general and history. And, and it was brothers in the crowd. They did not agree with did not agree, with Dr. Clark and his assessment. And some of them got into their feelings. My thing with anybody, I'm willing to listen to anybody or everybody, because there's truth in a lie. There's good, even in bad. So you got to be open if you want to receive all that you need to receive in order to become liberated. So listening to that, I think it's very important people listening to that. Because one thing people always talking about with the minister is his speech he did some years ago. And since that time, he recanted his statement, and I heard him on several occasions recanted about how black people was cursed because they had nappy hair and their hair was not straight like their eyebrow hair. And he said, his hair was straight on his head as well as his eyebrow, so he was blessed by God. But black people were cursed because their hair was nappy. It was not straight as their eyebrow. And people got into that. I remember even people on Facebook told me, well, you meet the minister, ask him about that comment. But he already addressed that. And I'm sure that's going to live with him and follow him for a while. But the thing about it is, I just think it's all this stuff is crazy. And I'm going to, I'm going to have to do some more shows about this as well. I'll get people feedback on the justice or else thing. I think it's very important. But the thing about it is, people came on Saturday. If you was looking for a certain type of thing, you might have been disappointed. Now, if you came with an open spirit in mind, you might have left more fulfilled than you actually thought you would be. So that's how things work. But with the justice or else thing, I think if minister read some of Thomas Paine or read the entire Thomas Paine slavery essay about the enslaved African in America, if we read the African slavery in America, and we also read parts of David Walker's appeal and explained to the people who David Walker was and the importance of the appeal, I think it could have fulfilled a lot of things. I mean, I don't really think the minister touched upon reparations, nor did he mention Africa. That's another thing. In his speech, like, it was very critical. Dr. John Henry Clark was very critical of the fact that minister did not mention Africa nowhere in his speech 20 years ago. And I haven't listened to the entire speech. Even though I was there, I didn't listen to the entire speech, verbatim. But, I don't think he mentioned Africa at all this time around either. And I just think that's interesting because, minister did bring up Malcolm X. And one thing about Malcolm X that, everybody can appreciate, if you don't agree with everything Brother Malcolm did, he understood the importance of internationalizing the Black liberation movement at home. He understood the importance of creating networks and relationships with people abroad, with brothers and sisters in the motherland, with brothers and sisters spread throughout the diaspora. He understood the importance of that. And there was no mention, really, of doing that in the minister's speech. He did not talk about that. He did not talk about Africa, us having a relationship with Africa, us doing business and building with Mother Africa. He didn't make a mention of that, as far as I know. But I think it was like one way we get out of this mess is by having solidarity, economic solidarity. I think when I went to Selma, the most important speech that whole weekend was Andrew Young's speech, I believe, that he gave at Brown Chapel AME Church, when he talked about, in this system, the color that matters is green, not black and white. The world is speaking green right now, and Black Americans, we being left behind because we're not organized enough to take advantage of some of these opportunities in this system. People could talk about capitalism and the evils of capitalism, all that stuff. But my problem with us is that we still want to play a game we don't know how to play. Unless we build our own paradigm, our own universe, our own nation. And I say, now let's build our own paradigm. Paradigm to me is about building or creating a universe. If we step outside this system and create our own, then we can win. But you cannot dismantle the master house with the master's tools. I repeat, you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. So that means that if you're a black person and you want justice from the Just Us system, you won't get it because it's not meant to serve black people. The Just Us system. It's not meant to provide compensation or any type of support for black people. You're not going to get it from the system. The only way you get a justice is you actually create your own. You create your own system. You create your own paradigm. You create your own world with your own rules. You create your own game. It's like, for example, you look at black people in sports. Black folks, we dominating. We dominate football, basketball, even tennis. But the thing about it is, you still got to play by their rules in those games. They could change the rules on you in any moment. Like in football, what used to be a catch, they say, no, it's not a catch no more because we changed the rules. Okay? This is what they can do. This is what white supremacy do. When they see you winning, they can change the rules while you playing the game, so at the end you can lose. That's the power of creating your own paradigm, of your own reality. And I don't think that the minister really touched upon that. We can't get no justice in this system for black people. The best thing we got is or else. And the or else can look like anything. And we're lacking vision for ourselves because we depend on our enemy to provide us with our purpose and our identity. And that's the wrong way to be. And another thing I would tell black folks to look into is Brother Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. Kwame Ture was a close friend of Minister Farrakhan. And also he was a student of Elijah Muhammad. And that was Stokely words. I mean, he said he was a follower, and he was no black Muslim. In that sense, he wasn't a member of the Nation of Islam. But he was a follower of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he talked about Another thing, I'm glad the internet, please people, if anything, if you don't hear anything else I got to say, check out Kwame Ture in his own words. It's worth it. I've been listening to Stokely Kwame Ture for the last week. I mean, getting prepared for the march, the rally, the gathering. I just started listening to hours and hours of Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture. I'm just gonna call him Kwame Ture. I was listening to him for hours. Like, it's a YouTube video or video out, and like him talking about converting the unconscious to the conscious. And I think it's very important people listening to that, especially people that call themselves revolutionaries or liberators. You should listen to the words of the great man himself out of the grave and on your laptop, your iPod, whatever. But he was talking about, meeting with Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad said, "You're a very important man. You need to be protected. They're gonna come after you, brother. We're gonna protect you." And Stokely said, or Kwame said, I don't need any protection. I thank you. He said, "Brother, I ain't asked you if you needed protection. We're gonna protect you. I'm gonna have the brothers look out for you, the fruit of Islam. Wherever you go, we're gonna be looking out for you." And so what Stokely was talking about, what Kwame was talking about, I think is very important, because I think he did that lecture not that long after the Million Man March. And he's talking about the difference between being a mobilizer and an organizer. You see, a mobilizer, like, for example, he used Dr. King and Malcolm X as his examples. He's like, King was a great mobilizer, but not necessarily an organizer. A mobilizer, they are the types that can get people out into the streets. And, like you said, let's say a police brutality case happens and people get mad. These are people that come out, into the streets and lead marches, sit-ins, activist rallies, give great speeches. And then when they leave town, the energy just dissipates because there's no focus, no organization left in place to put all the energy into use to sustain the movement, to sustain that feeling in order to create a revolution. And he said that Kwame said that Malcolm was both a mobilizer and an organizer. He was charismatic, a great orator like King. But once he left a city, he left a mosque. When he was the Nation of Islam, he'll get the people out, talk to them, rally them up, get them inspired, motivated. And before he leaves, he makes sure that a mosque or organizational institution was in place in order to take that energy that was summoned and to channel it into something that could create a solution, to create revolution and create liberation. And so a lot of times, like, we look at things like, the gathering, the Justice or Else or the Million Man March or whatever. We look at it, we mistake it for, it's a mobilization event. It's not a movement. It's a mobilization event. People gotta understand, people would say that we were disappointed because we didn't get no marching orders. But the minister, he got a role. We all got a role to play. And the thing about it is, you got to find out what your purpose is. And not only that, your purpose should be, how can I use my talents and my abilities to liberate myself and liberate my people? You got to discover what your talents and gifts are for you and where you fit in the picture. And I know people say they have been given marching orders, but sometimes, we are the leaders that we're looking for. We don't need a Masonic figure. We don't need a one person leading us. That's a fallacy. Because like Dr. John Henry Clark said, we got to bury the man and continue to plan. We all got a date with death. And nothing don't stop because we stop. It shouldn't be like that. You should bury the man and continue to plan. But we do got to have a vision for what we're trying to do. And, I remember I had heard a speech, Elijah Muhammad, talking about his meeting with Dr. King, and he had great love and respect for Dr. King, but he thought that Dr. King, with the marching and the rallying, was not the way to go. He felt like your energies could be best used to do for self and create your own organizations and your own institutions. And even now, I don't think that, going to marches and rallies, spending all that money would be our best, and not in our best interest would be the best thing to do at this point in time. Just given this, the technology we have with social media, Instagram, YouTube, we got all this stuff at our disposal. I I don't want to go to a thing 20 years from now, and we still talking about, things we talking about right now in 2015, or what we talked about in 1995. If we're gonna do that, we should own the transportation that we travel in. We should own the gas stations that we fill up at. We should own the hotels where we stay at. And we should own the restaurants where we eat at. What I'm getting at here is that the people on the move should be going somewhere. And the place that they should be going to, it should be a place that they own. Like Billie Holiday saying, God bless a child that got its own. God bless a child that got its own. And if we want to bless ourselves and the generation to come after us, we must have ownership of our identity, of our culture, heritage, of our economic situation, education, all that stuff. Because at the bottom of your education is knowledge yourself. It shouldn't take the minister to tell you who you are in 2.5 hours. You should be learning about that 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We got to do for self. We got to do for self, people. We got to free our mind. We got to free ourselves. And also, political prisoners, that was not really touched upon. Not by the minister. It might have been touched upon earlier in the rally, in the gathering. I don't know. But with us, we get so into our emotions. Like, if we said we at war, why are we not training for war? If there's been a war on melanated people since the creation before and after this republic, then why are we not disciplined? Why don't we control? How can you have a war if you don't have any hospitals to take care of your sick and wounded? Or you don't control your food supply? See, we already in the belly of the beast. Ain't no getting around that. We in the belly of the beast. So why are we playing chicken? We got to start thinking, and we got to start getting real cerebral with this, In war, you got to understand who your enemy is, who your ally is, and who your friend is. In war, you got to understand who your enemy is, who your ally is, and who your friend is. I think also, I know when he came to Memphis, the minister talked about, finishing what Dr. King started with the Poor People Campaign back in '68. Dr. King, he was, of course, assassinated in Memphis trying to help black sanitation workers on April 4th, 1968. But he was working on a big Poor People Campaign, bringing, everybody, the disenfranchised, the dispossessed, black, white, poor, Native American, whatever, to D.C. to demand that the federal government redistribute the wealth. And that really what got Dr. King killed. We started getting into the economics of white supremacy. And we spoke out against the machinations of white supremacy when it came to militarism, things of that nature with the Vietnam War. And another thing I want to mention, that it was black people movement that birthed the anti-war movement. Like Stokely Carmichael and SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, came up with the phrase, "Hell no, we won't go," to protest the Vietnam War. It wasn't the hippies, it was the black folk, the black students, it was black power that created the anti-war movement. They also inspired King to speak out against the Vietnam War. And there's something that's not being talked about on a regular basis, not being amplified in the quote-unquote white people history or white people's media. It was black folks that came up with that. Malcolm X was protesting the Vietnam War, in the early 60s. He protested killing of Patrice Lumumba at the United Nations headquarters. So black folks, we have a strong history when it comes to right and wrong. We have a strong moral compass. That's why Dr. King said he has integrated his people into a burning house, because when we start talking about integration, black folks ain't thinking about we coming in with people with knowledge of self. We assimilated, meaning that we took on the good and bad of our enemy, the person that opposes our freedom and liberation. So don't mistake integration for assimilation. Know the difference, family. And like I said, know the difference between friends, allies, and enemies. So you have all this stuff going on where, that was not addressed by the minister on Saturday. But I'm not going to even go that hard on the minister because I can't think of nobody else who could actually get 1 million people of color to agree upon going or doing one thing, which was to attend his rally, our rally, the gathering. And that's an achievement in and of itself. But the work that needs to be done won't be seen on C-SPAN. I repeat, the work that needs to be done won't be seen on C-SPAN. It might not get tweeted. It might not get posted on Instagram. That's the work we got to do. Like I tell people all the time, I say, when you see a president or a head of state die, and they held their funeral, their state funeral, and you see the people that you know, like the Clintons and the Obamas and people like that, the most powerful people in the room are the ones standing next to the folks you know. They the one that runs the government. They the one that rule the world. They the power brokers and the king makers. So I tell people, I say, when you see that person that Obama's talking to and he's got a smiley face, Obama smiling and he's talking to this person, he said, who is that person? That's one of the most powerful people in the room. That's who that person is. So there you go. So I'm saying all this, I'm going to do another part to this conversation, which really isn't a conversation, just me talking. It's like a first draft or rough draft of my thoughts about the Million Man March anniversary Justice A.L.'s rally. I'm trying to think if I can, what else I'll touch upon. They really talk about political prisoners. I thought that was interesting. Or abolishing, we got to abolish the private prison industry complex. It's ridiculous. We got to abolish that as a people. We got to start moving on that. Interesting too. Minister, did not touch upon the Scientology or Dianetics. People say the Nation of Islam, they're deep into Scientology, Dianetics, I think I said. And he didn't touch upon that. He talked about religion. He talked about, Jesus. That was interesting. Because he is a religious figure. But he's a Muslim. So people say, why he's talking more about Christianity than he is about Islam? It's like apples and oranges, religion, I don't really, personally, I don't argue with people religious beliefs. I don't debate people on that. I don't debate them because, when you believe in something, that is your religion as far as I'm concerned. And you can't change nobody's mind when it comes to their religion unless they want to change their minds for themselves. And some people think that a solution would be to boycott Christmas. I know he mentioned that in his Memphis speech, boycotting Christmas. And I know Dick Gregory, he said we should boycott Christmas. I know this idea, and it's black folks that do boycott Christmas every year. I don't really go out my way buying people gifts, But I remember 50 years ago reading about, or 50-something years ago, 1963, I think the civil rights activists, like people like Dick Gregory now, was thinking about boycotting Christmas. That year you had the President Kennedy killed right before Thanksgiving, and then you had Medgar Evers, 4 little girls. So much stuff happened in 63, very violent year. And people think about boycotting Christmas that year. And my thing is this, yes, it's good to boycott, hit them in their pockets, but at the same time, where do we go from there? What is the economic blueprint for black liberation? Where do I put my black dollars so they can amplify my liberation? Not just make a statement for white supremacy or make a statement against white supremacy and racism and all that stuff, but what can I do with my black dollars in order to fund my liberation? What can I do with them? And there's really no collective vision for black people in this period. And you see the folks that are getting ahead, like the LGBTQ community and the immigrant community. They are organized. They are lobbying. They have people that speak for their point of view, and they're financing their platform. They're financing what they want to do and where they want to be in this paradigm. And that's one thing we fell in, because you cannot have black liberation with just white dollars supporting their liberation. You gotta have black folks supporting their liberation. Like Brother Malcolm said, by any means necessary, you must have black folks find a way to fund their own liberation. Whatever they can give you, they can take away from you. So you think about it, if they give you freedom, give you this, give you that, is that really justice? Is that really freedom? Because whatever they give, they could take away. White supremacy has a most definitely a God complex when it comes to stuff like that, especially as it relates to black people. It's a God complex that comes to stuff like that. The Definitely family, I told you, read up on Thomas Paine. Read up on David Walker. Read up on Stokely Carmichael. Hear him in his own words. These are three people that death cannot kill, because their ideas that they shared with the world lives on and needs to be talked about. So, I mean, those are some of my thoughts about the rally, the gathering, and feel free to share with me as well. Like I said, I'll be sharing more thoughts very soon, and even doing some podcasting with other people to get their thoughts about the whole thing. Yeah, another thing. Well, I talk about the Poor People Campaign. I'm all over the place. The reason why they didn't kill King, because this was different from the March on Washington in '63. The Poor People Campaign was about disrupting power, making power pay attention to the needs of the people. Whereas the March on Washington, or what Malcolm called the farce on Washington, was more about white power controlling black destiny. Whereas you had the white power structure that financed that march, and they control who got to spoke and who can say what. They were told what to say and all this other stuff. So it comes down, you think about what's going on right now with the Black Lives Matter movement being financed by white dollars. Ain't no different than what happened 50-something years ago. But with the Poor People Campaign, this is about planting the seeds of revolution. This is about, people shutting down the government, obstructing the government from doing this job of being a death machine. So they could not let King come to Washington, D.C. Not because King would have been the one leading all that, but because once King got the people there, the people was not beholden to being controlled by even Dr. King himself. It's like in '63, they couldn't really control the people. But in '68, we was deep into the Vietnam War, and the United States imperialists were already overextended in Southeast Asia. So they was undermanned at home. And to help Dr. King, bring an army of the dispossessed, this is like to be like the bonus army on steroids. They had to get them in Memphis. And they got them in Memphis. And it's been proven in '99 when they had the court trial that the government was implicit in the killing of Dr. King. I ain't talking about the mailman. Okay, people say, well, you saying the mailman and the National Park Rangers did Dr. King? No, don't be naive. There's a government that and then there's a shadow government. You understand? So there you go. But if you really, power can see something without demand. And December 1st will mark the 60th anniversary of the start of the Montgomery bus boycott. Something that we need to really study as black people today. Because like I said, everybody's getting ahead in this period with Obama is because they organized, because they're well-financed, and because they study our blueprint that we had 50, 60 years ago with the Civil Rights Movement. And so we need to study that. We are too accommodating when it comes to folks mistreating us. I'm talking about black people, including ourselves. And we should have, since it wasn't really on the anniversary date of the original Million Man March, we should have came in the middle of the week when Congress was in session and disrupt DC. That'll be the best way to get their attention. We should have disrupted them. Came in the middle of the week. A million plus people to DC already, congested traffic in the DMV is tight. It's not as bad to me as Atlanta is, but imagine a million black folks on a national mall in the middle of the week while Congress is in session. That would have been one hell of a statement. They would have did what Dr. King wanted to do, or the people that was involved in the Poor People Campaign wanted to do. It was to disrupt business as usual, whereas we had the march on a 3-day weekend, a weekend that honored Columbus, one of the worst, people you could actually honor. People talk about Bill Cosby. Look at Columbus. Okay? Read up on the history of what Columbus actually did. And the things they said he did, he didn't do. But the things he did do, they don't want you to know about it. They don't want to amplify it. So we could have had that in the middle of the week. And imagine the press and the media attention we would have got then. Imagine the media attention we would have got then, because they would have shut down the government. They talking about they want to shut down the government on December the 12th or whatever. They could have shut it down last week or this week with justice or else. We could have got our reparations. They could have cut a check for us that day. If they cut a check for the victim's family in Monday Manuel 9, the dude killed them on Wednesday, and on Friday the government cut a check to the victims' families for $29 million. So there you go. Power concedes nothing without demand. But I hope I said something as I ramble along here. There's thoughts coming to my head. I know I'm all over the place, but I hope I said some things that you could actually look up for yourself and research and spread it among your people. Because, people like Farrakhan's 82 years old. Will he be around for the next, will he be around for the 40th anniversary? Who knows? He might. He takes good care of himself. He look good. He look good for his age. But the thing about it is, it's not on Farrakhan for you to get free or for me to get free. It's on us as individuals as well as a collective to get free. We got to figure that way out for ourselves. So I commend Minister for doing what he has done, in terms of bringing people together. But now it's the time, family, for us to pick up the call, or answer the call, rather, and move the ball down the field even further. Because the thing about it is, there's a disconnect intergenerationally. The young people are willing. Maybe the elders are willing too in a certain degree, but they're not able. Or maybe it's like, fear. We got to find a way to get around our fear, because we're dying anyway. One way or the other, they're killing us. So we got to stop letting our fear of death and of validation and acceptance. They won't accept. If they can't respect your human rights, there are no other rights they are bound to respect. So why you worry about what they think about you when they don't think that much of you at all, if they can't respect your human rights? So you got to start looking at all that. It's the big picture. But family, I'm going to wrap it up for this session, but feel free to subscribe. If you like what you hear, you want to hear more of it, please think about giving a donation. We are a 501c3. It's tax deductible, family. And until the next time, in the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. And keep on producing and pushing. Peace.